Welcome back, losers. In this video, I'm going to be building the new event in Fortnite Chapter 5 Season 4, Fortnightmares out of Lego. Season 4 has been my favorite season of the chapter so far. We finally got rid of those awful cars. The story is, well, pretty much as good as it gets for Fortnite, and I'm really enjoying being interested in Marvel again. But now, once again, it's that time of the year where we don on our jack-o'-lanterns and partake in the annual slaughtering of children online. Fortnightmares has brought some new POIs to the map like Freaky Fields, Rave Cave, Cuddle Teen Leader, and Brawler's Patch, which is the first location I decided I wanted to tackle. I decided to get to work on this little Coliseum area. Essentially, I came up with the idea of using all these slow pieces on their sides and eventually made the shape of a giant circle. In my head, I thought this was going to be an easy build, but it ended up taking quite a bit of math to figure this one out. In the end, I was left with this glorified hockey puck, and I was pretty excited to get started on the next step, which was to add in some columns. I actually ran out of the white rounded bricks, so I kind of sprinkled in some light gray ones. I think it ended up making a nicer texture anyways. Now I was ready to get started on the giant jack-o'-lantern, and thankfully LEGO came out with this awesome gift with purchase earlier this year, which is great because now I have less work. Also grabbed this giant Doctor Strange monster. It wasn't doing anything for the LEGO city, and I can really use those tentacles as vines. I gave it a humane death and put it out of its misery, and got to work on the final build. The main challenge I had when building this giant jack-o'-lantern thing was being able to hold the pumpkin up by the stem. In the game, it almost looks like the vines are coming from the bottom of the pumpkin, but in reality, they're actually coming from the top stem. So I really wanted to maintain that, and that made things unnecessarily hard. I came up with a base that holds the main vine. That way I can put other vines coming out of it. It ended up being a little flimsy, and I had the jack-o'-lantern kind of floating in air. It took a lot of attempts, but I think I finally got something that looks decent. I used some snot pieces in the base to put some plates, that way I could hold it up. I came up with a pretty crude way of doing this. It actually kind of looks a little cursed, but I guess that's the point, right? In hindsight, I wish I made the vines look a little bit thicker, but I think this serves its purpose. Next, I started working on the roof of the structure. In the game, there's like a big red dome on top of it. I opted not to do that because I thought that the red would really clash with the orange, and I didn't want to take away from the jack-o'-lantern. That, and I just didn't feel like doing it. Now it's time for the fun part, adding all the accessories. Pretty much just put an assortment of different kinds of pumpkins and jack-o'-lanterns all throughout, as well as including a few vine pieces just to make it pop a little bit more. For the figures, I simply dug into my wife's Disney collection and found this Captain Hook. I thought it'd be really funny to give him a custom pumped shotgun. I feel like that'd be really hard to use with a hook hand. Next, I gave the Jackal launcher to Meowscles. Then I added in Spider-Man's side piece, Black Cat, which came to the item shop a few months ago. And last, I went ahead and added Cuddle Team Leader, who's just landed from the bus. And there we go, this is my completed Brawler's Patch build. Overall, I'm pretty happy with how it came out, especially for it really only being like a day's worth of work. If I were to redo it, I would probably work on making the vines a little bit thicker, but I'm actually really happy with how it came out. Now let's get a little freaky with this next build. Starting this one off, I put all this boring green plates together to kind of make a base. Normally I like to do something a little bit more creative, but with something that's kind of flat like this, I didn't really know what else to do. Now one of the major features of Freaky Fields is the really tall grass where all the wild Pokemon are hanging out. And I thought this would be a pretty easy thing to replicate in LEGO, but I actually had a really hard time getting this right. I had a surplus of these little green grass pieces and I thought they'd be perfect for it, but unfortunately they just come really short when you put it next to a minifigure. I was able to find some pieces that made the grass a little bit taller, but unfortunately I was really lacking in those particular pieces, so I had to really cut down the amount of grass in the field, which I think really hurt this build, but I did not want to go spend more money on this. Next, I wanted to add some sort of building structure to it. I could have gone with the giant house where the Saw guy lives, but he scares me too much. So I made this cute little shed instead. I used these white profile bricks to make it look like it's wood. And then I added some random vines on the top of the roof. I think it came out really nice. Now that the base of the build was done, it was time to add all the spooky little features. Starting off, I made this custom scarecrow. And I placed a generous amount of pumpkins and jack-o'-lanterns. I tossed in a few other details like this wheelbarrow and hay, as well as a larger jack-o'-lantern and a chest. And it was finally time to put some figures in here, and I knew exactly which figure I wanted to start with. This is probably the best skin that's come out this season, Mrs. Incredible. I bought this skin day one, and I was excited to open up this set until I realized that this version of Mrs. Incredible was a little too flexible. So it was time to suit up. I headed over to my local Bricks and Minifigs, and I wasn't very sure that they would have her, but I was in luck. They had one and only Mrs. Incredible. So I snagged her for 17 bucks, which is kind of funny when you think about how much the skin is on Fortnite. By the way, did I mention that last year for Halloween, my wife and I went as the Incredibles? Anyways, it was time to start placing figures in my build. I wanted to be sure to add in the new chainsaw mythic because I actually really like it. So I placed a trail of dirt so it looked like the chainsaw was cutting through it. I decided it'd be funny to have Mrs. Incredible being the one holding it. I also found this Cruella Cruella de Vil figure and thought it'd be perfect to add. Side note, how crazy is it that we have these Disney villains in Fortnite? It's kind of cool seeing Disney characters running around in Battle Royale. And by the way, if you're planning on picking up these skins or anything else in the item shop, please be sure to use my code ANTISTUD. It'll really help out the channel so I can keep up making these mediocre builds. I gave Cruella de Vil a handgun and put her over in the side. And I also thought it'd be funny to give Sally some dual SMGs. I wanted to add a few more pumpkins, so I ended up moving Sally in place of this wagon full of pumpkins. And I put Sally on top of the barn. I thought the build could use just a little bit more pumpkins, so I found this big Lego pumpkin I didn't even know I had and placed it in the corner. And with that, my Freaky Fields build is done. I'm actually pretty happy with how this came out. I think it's really cute and cozy. I wish I had figured out something better for the grass, but I think it serves its purpose. And all the orange from the pumpkins I think adds a lot of nice color to it. And now I was ready for my final build. I'm not gonna lie, I kind of struggled coming up with something for this one. I already built the 2 major POIs, so I really didn't know what to do until I found myself in Grimm's Gate. For whatever reason, they changed the color of the river from green to red, and I thought this would be a great time to try something with some unusual parts. I found my old build from Season 3 and decided this would make a great base. I use the snot pieces on the side so I can get this kind of rocky looking effect, and I figured it'd be another easy way to save some time. I then started deconstructing it and got ready to repurpose it. This ended up being pretty easy because I just covered it in a bunch of gray plates, as you can easily tell with my poorly focused camera. Next, I got started on a build I've always wanted to do and something I'm very familiar with, the reboot van, usually because I'm the one being rebooted. Came up with this pretty crude design and I think it's gonna look great. I really like that I was able to get that cartoon effect on the TVs. Now, onto the river. I ended up finding this one particular piece that's probably one of the most useless Lego pieces to have in bulk. Red rubies. But now I finally have a use for them. So satisfying. I was actually pretty surprised at how nice this looks. It's kind of a lazy tactic, but that's kind of what we're all about here. I then added the reboot van, which added a nice touch of color, then got to work adding some figures. I first added Venom holding my poor attempt of a Boom Billy. I also added Samuel Jackson drinking a 50 pot. And lastly, I ended up moving Cuddle Team Leader over here because it made sense that she was being rebooted. And here's the completed build for my dinky little Grimm's Gate build. I feel like it actually looks pretty good if you squint your eyes. All in all, this was kind of a challenging video to make, mostly because there wasn't really any major changes to the map. I also really wanted to get this video out before Halloween, so I didn't make quite as big as builds as I normally would. And this will wrap us out for Fortnightmares as well as the end of Chapter 5. Wow. I can't believe we're about to start Chapter 6. Let's take a look back down memory lane. Remember all the fun we had in Chapter 5. Remember those cars? I bet you do.
Me apart. It's ruining everything. Oh, I swore I would be true, and honey, so did you. So why were you holding her hand? Is it just the way we stand? Were you lying all the time? Was it just a game to you? But it's so deep. You know I'm such a fool for you. You got me wrapped around your finger. Do you have to let it linger? Do you have to? Do you have to? Do you have to let it linger?